When I was a young kid, maybe around 7 or so years old, we used to have a babysitter that would babysit me and my brother when we were young. Now, this babysitter, we'll call her Stephanie, was one of the sweetest babysitters we've ever had. Now, her father was a good friend to my parents, and of course, Stephanie would always babysit us, and she mainly babysat us a lot. She would sometimes take us to the park, take us to drive-thrus at McDonald's, and etc. And we would usually watch movies and every now and then. One night, however, was something that made me have chills down my spine. Now, let's just start off by saying that my parents were going out on a little date with a bunch of their friends as they were having like a little Christmas party. Now, it was sometime before Christmas, at least a week before, and it was my dad's work hosting the party, so me and my brother were stayed back with a babysitter, Stephanie. Now, Stephanie was making supper in the kitchen while me and my brother were watching TV. It was the Big Comfy Couch, and that was one of the shows we really liked when we were younger. It was still on TV at the time, so it didn't really matter much that we were watching TV. Now, Stephanie was making lunch in the kitchen when she noticed someone or something outside the house. Now, Stephanie ended up looking over and could see that there was a man. He seemed to be wearing a hood and probably some jeans, and he looked about maybe 5'7" or something. He looked like no one has ever seen him before, and my brother and I didn't know him. Stephanie continued to make when all of a sudden she looked over to see something tapping on the window, and it was the same man. Stephanie immediately told me and my brother to go upstairs and hide, and we did it without a question. We were in our rooms when we heard some banging coming from the back door. I did not expect what was going to happen, but this was scary. My heart was racing. Until eventually there was some screaming, yelling, and then of course sirens in the distance could be heard. And at least after 10 minutes later, Stephanie opened our bedroom doors and told us to come out and say that it's okay. We saw a man that was in handcuffed, and he looked really evil as he gave Stephanie a smile, an evil one at that, saying that he'll come back for us one day. Now, the police asked Stephanie a bunch of questions, and I didn't really understand it at the time. My parents came home as soon as they heard that, and that was just all I remember. It wasn't until a couple years later, sometime around 2017, when I met Stephanie working at a life skills in a high school, and this is when the conversation was brought up. Stephanie said that a man had tried to break into our house, and of course, with that said, she ended up getting a knife and ended up start screaming and yelling at him to get off the property. Of course, that was after she called the police when he tried to break down the back door. But unfortunately, with that being said, he couldn't do it, so he was trying to go through the front to see if he could figure out a way to get in. And that's when the police had caught him. But with that being said, he was a serial killer, and of course, he was known for kidnapping people. But with that being the case, my brother and I were really scared of our wits by this. We never saw that man again, and I know there's a special place in hell waiting for him. Now, so this happened about maybe a few years ago, sometime around 2014 or 2015, when we had a babysitter named Laura to look after me and my brother. I know they would say, 16 and possibly 13 were too old for a babysitter, but unfortunately, with the time of this story, there were some reports of people going missing from age ranges for between 14 and even to 17. So my mom and dad even got a babysitter named Laura to look after us. Laura was around her 20s, and her job was to make sure that me and my brother and we were just happy and making sure nothing happens. However, Laura was sleeping in my parents' room at the time, as my parents were going to be out most of the night and there was no telling when they'll be home. My brother and I had to go to bed early as we would have school the next day, and of course, Laura was just sleeping in the bedroom. As she was sleeping, she woke up to hearing the sound of the phone ringing. Laura looked over to realize that it was from my parents' bed on my dad's nightstand. So she was on my mom's. She crawled over to my dad's side of the bed, and opened up the phone by taking it off the stand and looked. She thought it might have been a scam or at least some people looking for my parents, but with that being said, she ended up answering it. Hello? She called. But of course, I ended up going to the bathroom, so Laura looked up and saw me going to the bathroom, which of course she nodded, didn't reply, knowing that she knew I would just go straight to bed. But with that being said, though, Laura wasn't really surprised when there was nothing on the other end. She hung up the phone, and just as she was about to head back to bed, the phone rang again. This time it was the same number, and this time she got up. Hello, who the hell are you? Why are you calling me and around 10 at night? Laura scolded. But of course, this was when things got really messed up. On the other end, there was a voice that said, I know where you are. This actually scared Laura, and she ended up going to the bathroom, knocked on my door, and told me to hide my brother in there and to not come out. I asked her why, and she said she didn't know. And of course, we hid there for a while. But it wasn't long until the police showed up and she explained what happened to them. But it wasn't until she told me not too long, and I found out something. That man was actually Laura's stalker, who had been calling her and asking her out to be his girlfriend when he literally was a little older, probably around maybe his mid-30s while she was in her 20s. This honestly freaked me out, as Laura had finally got a restraining order from him and told my parents about this. Now, we had not seen or heard from this guy again, and Laura has not heard from this guy again, and I just hope it stays that way for a very long time. When I was about maybe 18 or 19 years old, I was babysitting two kids for a good friend for my mom. Now, at the time of this story, Garrett, who was the boy I was babysitting, was around maybe 11 or 12, while the girl Olivia was probably around maybe 7 or 8. I was babysitting them for one day as their parents had gone out to do some stuff for their work. So, with that being said, I was told to babysit the two kids for a while. Now, I went to their house and I brought them along with some movies and even my phone and even some other stuff to keep me busy. Now, with that being said, the parents had left me to order them pizza, which that's what I did. I ordered them pizza, and with that being the case, I ended up doing my usual thing. But of course, Garrett's bedtime was around maybe 10, and Olivia's was around 9. Shortly after the kids went to bed, it was around 10:30. I was watching a movie, which I think it was Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. As I was watching it on TV, I then heard what seemed to be someone or something while running down the basement. I thought maybe it might have been Garrett getting something, so I walked over there, but I couldn't see anyone. I called out if Garrett was downstairs, but unfortunately that was not the case. I asked him, Garrett, are you down there? But there was no voice coming from the basement, and of course I ended up deciding to go find out if it was Garrett in there. He needed to be in bed. So with that being said, I got downstairs, but as soon as I got downstairs, I called out if Garrett was downstairs, but there was no response. I then went upstairs to think maybe Garrett was in his room, and surprisingly he was in his bedroom the whole time. He did not even move. He was still in the basement. Not in the basement, he was just in his bedroom. Olivia was in there too, so I thought maybe it might have been my imagination. Just as I was about to go to unpause my movie and continue watching it, I then looked and heard that there was a laughter. I didn't even know what or who it was, but it sounded like really, really shocking. I ended up getting up to see if there was someone or something in the house, but there was nobody else in the house. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find anyone. I ended up thinking maybe something was not right, so I ended up getting confused. Who or what would be up and around this late at night? I ended up thinking maybe it was just my imagination, so I ended up going to my bedroom, and well, the bedroom I'd be sleeping in case if I were to sleep. I was just falling asleep when all of a sudden I woke up to hearing Olivia screaming. I ended up losing my shit, and I ended up going over to see Olivia screaming and crying. I asked her what was the matter, and she said she saw someone or something in the closet, and that's when I end up taking a look. I opened up the closet, and I couldn't see anybody, but I could see there was a silhouette, or at least a silhouette of a man. I ended up booking it out of there with Olivia and called the police, but as soon as the police arrived and took a look, they couldn't find anyone. And of course, I didn't get a good features of what this man looked like. With that being said, I had no idea if this was paranormal or it might have been maybe somebody playing a trick. With that being the case, I never babysat for those two again, as I was very paranoid and had paranoia over it for a last little while. Now, I don't even know if this was paranormal or maybe somebody was actually attempt to try to hurt the kids, but I never went there to that house again, and nothing like that has ever happened since.